CSCS Exam Prep got the secret weapon nobody talks about, day of exam prep, and we are starting right now. How are you doing today? My name is David Barr. If this is your first time here, be sure to hit that subscribe and then the little bell so you don't miss the latest tips and tricks for exam prep. We are live right now. Anything could happen, but we got the biggest secret weapon I have found because no one talks about the day of exam prep. And this one kicked off, and I was actually tutoring a guy for the CSCS. He had tried the exam before, hadn't been successful. So we were trying to figure out, okay, what's going on? What are the things that we can do to fix? And it turns out he was actually relatively prepared in terms of the information, but he didn't have his game day prep down. And this is a huge flaw. It's a bit like an athlete prepping, having their training, nutrition locked down, but then they get to the event, they get to their match, their game, whatever, and they don't know what's going on. So this is a real hidden gem. I think a lot of people can benefit from this, and it's something we're going to cover today. Again, we are live. Anything could happen. Who knows? Okay, jumping in. This is what I call the part of threes. Okay, this is going to be starting off. We're going to break 3 strategies or tips down into 3 different parts. So it's delivered in nice, simple chunks for you. And at the very end, stay tuned because we'll give you the walkthrough for how to actually take advantage of these tips and give you your next steps for how to actually dominate the exam. Now, another big one, I haven't seen anyone do this before. I'd like to give you an opportunity to be able to influence the content, to be able to hit your problem areas. So I'll talk about that a little later on, but you'll definitely want to stay tuned for that one. So the goals overall, real quick, before we jump into the meat, overall, my goal is to reduce your test anxiety, your exam anxiety. We all get stressed out around exams, and some of these are general tips that can be applied everywhere. Some are more specific to the CSCS. Overall, I just want you to feel more prepared for the exam, help you feel better going in, and just overall have more confidence so you can focus on the actual exam itself. Lastly, overall, my personal goal is to help advance the field. I love CSCS, love the NSCA certifications, and I think the more people we can get involved and passing the exam because they're prepared and qualified to do the jobs, the better overall for our industry. Now, one last point before we get to the meat. I'm talking about specificity and not a guarantee. Okay, so the things I talk about in this video and other videos in this series, it is not specifically endorsed or supported by the NSCA or any other organization. This is just my experience based on the fact I've been doing exam prep for 7 years now. I've tutored people on this. We've had some great successes working with different people who have not been successful, but then through different tips and tricks that they've learned through working together, they have come out very successful. So I want to share some of those tips and tricks. But again, if you encounter something new or something different on your exam, something different from what I've said, that is about your preparation. Okay, I'm not making any specific claims about the exam, what's on it. Okay, I can give you my ideas, but they're not official. Okay, if you want that official info, be sure to check out the Facebook group for CSCS Exam Prep. It is awesome. And also be sure to check out a live exam prep. If you can make it to NSCA Colorado Springs headquarters, that's even better, but they're pretty awesome everywhere they're held. All right, so let's jump into this. Okay, number 1, we are pre-exam. Okay, so this is more general stuff, and the goals for this section are, again, to mitigate your exam prep stress, mitigate that day of exam prep stress, and then optimize your performance during the exam. So this is all about the background check, doing your due diligence before the exam so you know what you're getting into. So you want to know, for example, how many questions are there? How long do I have for each section? Those kinds of things. Now, this may seem silly, but I had a horrible experience with this, a personal experience. I was sitting for the GRE, Graduate Record Exam. This thing is a beast. This is 3 different sections, and it's the exam for entrance into graduate school. So I thought I was pretty prepared. I rocked through my 3 sections. And I don't know about you, but when I'm done an exam, this is months of prep that I'm just so happy to be done with. It is so cathartic. I just want to, kind of yell and take a nap at the same time. I didn't even drink. I was going to go home and have a beer at the time. Like it was awesome. So I hit send on my computerized test, finished that last section, and another section popped up. And I was, what the hell is going on? Well, it turns out for the GRE, certain lucky people get to take 2 parts, or get to take one part of the exam twice. One part is scored, the other is not. They do this so they can validate and standardize the exams. So here I am, ready to be done, thinking I'm done. I'm already, halfway out the door, and I have to do another section. So I was totally not prepared for that. That was totally on me, right? My lack of preparation. That was my problem. So the good news is, personally, I was ultimately successful with the exam, but for you, for the CSCS, you don't have to do a whole other section. I think it's roughly 10 questions that aren't actually contributing to your score. These are just, again, more about validating and standardizing the test. But just make sure you know what's going on. When you have more questions than you may be prepared for. So make sure you're prepped for that. Also, just like every other game day, you want to make sure that you're prepared for the actual event. And yes, you're not competing in terms of sports, but you want to have your comfortable clothing, your lucky underwear, whatever it happens to be. You want to make sure you have your food nailed down, what you're going to eat before, when you're going to eat. Standard practice, right? Like you don't introduce new stuff before you go into an exam or a competitive event, right? Related to that is going to be understand when your bathroom breaks are. Do you get bathroom breaks? Can you have water in the exam with you? Or do you have to basically water fast for a little bit? For some people, that's going to be a problem. Others, not so bad. But if you're drinking a lot beforehand and you have to use the restroom, not a good sign. So make sure you understand that before the exam and when you're going into it. That can also help inform your caffeine intake before. Caffeine's a diuretic. You may have to go to the bathroom more frequently. So just be aware of that and be careful of that. Lastly, this is a big FAQ I get. How many video replays do we get? And if you're like me, sitting for the exam with a group of people doing the whole old school pencil and paper, you only get a couple playthroughs for each of the videos. If you're doing it on a computer based, my understanding is that you have an unlimited number of playthroughs as long as it's within the allotted time of the exam. But be sure to double check that before you go into the exam. This is all about prep, right? So you want to nail that down. Travel, again, may not apply to everybody, but for those of you who have to travel for the exam, the goals for this section are to, again, mitigate that anxiety and make sure, or try to help ensure that you are punctual. There are certain things in life you cannot be late for. This is one of them, okay? It's like your wedding and then your CSCS exam prep, okay? Definitely be punctual for that. So how do you deal with this? Maybe if you're higher anxiety, like I am, when it comes to travel, when it comes to, pre-exam prep, stress, that kind of thing, the combination of the two is not great. So we want to get rid of that or mitigate that as much as possible, right? So be specific about what you're doing. So some people, you have an overnight stay. For 2 of my exams, for my CSCS back in the day, and then CSPS, I actually had overnight stays. I stayed in a hotel before the exam, so I had to travel accordingly. My CSCS, I think I took 5 different modes of public transportation to actually get to the exam. I didn't even know there were that many in existence, but that's what we did. But for the other 2, TSAC and NSCA CPT, I took the computer-based exam, but even though I'm in Colorado Springs, right by NSCA headquarters, we didn't have an in-town actual exam prep or test center. So I had to go about an hour away to Denver. And that's the kind of thing you need to plan for. And that's the equation here, not to study for your actual exam, but for the day of the exam, getting to your destination on time. So I always double the allotted time expected to get to the destination and then add 20 minutes. And that takes into account things like traffic, etc. And if you get to your exam location early, which is great, you should ideally, you don't actually have to go into the testing center. And in fact, I would recommend that you don't actually go in, that you stay outside, go find a local coffee shop. For TSAC, I just hit a Panera for a couple hours, just making sure that you can stay away and only reserve your presence at the testing center for that exam. And that is a general testing strategy. You can use that for pretty much any type of exam or big test. If you're, again, very high anxiety like me, last tip, when it comes to travel, you can actually scout ahead of time. If you know when your exam is, the day and the time, for a few weeks before, you can actually look at the traffic beforehand. So 2-3 weeks out, take a look at what the traffic is like on the route to your destination. If it's bad, give yourself more time. If it's not too bad, you might want to try the doubling plus 20-minute guideline. So really up to you. Don't get more stressed out than you need to about it. And I think these tips will help with that. Now, I mentioned earlier that you might be able to help influence some of the content here, tailor it more specifically to your needs. And this is the kind of thing I would love to hear from you. I'd like to get your input in the comment section. What are your areas that you need help with? And that's something, the more comments I can get, the broader the scope I can cover and really ultimately drill down into more specific topics. So if I can hear from you, great. Let me know what those areas are, and then I can address those in future live streams, future videos, that kind of thing. All right, home stretch. We are in the exam, intro exam, and there's but one goal, that is domination. How do we do that? The key, the big one, the meat here, is the read through. And this may seem challenging to you, but it's worth hearing me out. I always recommend reading through the exam once before you answer any questions. And it's not going to take a ton of time, okay? What's happening is as you're reading through, your brain is starting to process offline those questions that you've already read through. Even though you're reading through subsequent questions, your brain's working on the previous questions. So when you hit that second read through, you want to answer the easiest questions first. If you have to really think about it, don't worry about it. You can just skip over it and then move on to the next easiest question. And I had a hard time doing this for my NSCA CPT exam. I basically didn't answer any questions on my second read through. That is really unnerving, very, very stressful, disconcerting. Not a great situation to be in, right? Well, it turned out to be one of my most successful exams. So just because you're not getting the answers on the first or even second read through, that's okay. It will come. It just might take a little more time for your exam. Again, always watch the clock, be aware of the clock. Maybe don't watch the clock, just be aware of it, because a read through shouldn't take that long. So if you do one, you do two, answer a few questions on the second pass, it's not going to actually cut into your time that badly, but it will actually help you start to process the answers to some of those questions. Now, in working with a client, he was unsuccessful in some earlier attempts on the exam. So trying to troubleshoot and go, okay, what can we do differently? Because what you're doing now is not working. So how can we fix it? And to be clear, none of this is a criticism, right? Like it's in both our interests to help somebody pass an exam. Like you want to pass and I want to help you pass. So it's not criticism. It's really about finding those areas, those opportunities for improvement, and then tackling those and then ultimately succeeding, right? So I told him about the read through. Turns out he didn't do this, but he actually read through the questions so quickly before answering each one that he didn't always understand what the actual question was. So I thought this was a perfect opportunity to implement that read through. He said, no way, that is not happening. I'm just way too stressed out the day of. This is not going to be helpful. So after a couple days, couple sessions of kind of talking through this, we came to a compromise. He was going to read through 10 to 20 questions at a time and then go back and answer those. So rather than going through a full read through, he was going to do it in little pieces. So if that's the kind of adjustment that you need to make, if you think that's something that could be helpful for you, then give it a try. Just adjust, right? These are really specific things, again, I've found helpful. People I've tutored, people I've instructed, they found this helpful, but not every tip is going to be applicable for everyone, right? It's not a one size fits all thing. So the idea is for you to have like a buffet, and you choose the best things that you want, the things that are going to help you. And you can practice these with practice exams, right? You don't need to just introduce it the day of the exam. I would never recommend doing that, right? You always want to practice, prepare for that actual event. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. Another intra-exam tip, figure out if you're allowed to stand up, what kind of breaks you're allowed to take, because it's going to be different for different types of exams. I mean, for certain university exams, college exams, where I was a proctor, I was basically a moderator, people were allowed to use the restroom, so I would have to go accompany them to the restroom to try and make sure they're not cheating in any way. CSCS is probably not going to be like that, okay? Again, this is part of your prep. You want to do your background reading, background research into that, but figure out if you can stand up. Standing up shouldn't be a big deal. Hopefully you're not going to have someone right beside you sitting for the exact same exam, so you won't be accused of cheating, but find all that out, because standing up in the middle of an exam for 20, 30 seconds, waving your arms around, that's the kind of thing that can really help relieve some stress, kind of clear your head a bit, and help you get back at it with renewed vigor. So again, be sure to check beforehand, because you don't want to get called a cheater by doing something that you're not supposed to be doing. And this ties into different advantages. What are the advantages that you can use and take advantage of those to help your exam? So for example, earplugs, great option if you can take it. If it's something you are used to studying with, I would definitely recommend that. You might be given these at the actual testing center. Be sure to check ahead of time. In terms of the actual questions that you get for biomechanics or different movements, you should, no guarantees, you should be able to actually move around. Not stand up and jump around, but at your chair, flex your arms, your hips, your knees, that kind of thing. So if that kind of kinesthetic type of learning is very helpful for you, that might help to trigger an answer. So if you get a question about biceps curls, you can look down and actually curl an imaginary dumbbell. Okay, so those kinds of things, take advantage of that when you can. So here's your next 3 steps, next 3 things that you want to do. So you want to do your background check, right? You want to not only check the testing center, their policies, you want to check all the different exam info. So detailed content outline is a great example. We don't have time to go into that for this video, but I can go into that in future videos if you're interested. Again, let me know in the comments below. But be sure to research your travel if that's an issue for you. And then once you get into that exam, do the read-through. Practice it beforehand in your practice exams, but do the read-through when you're actually sitting for the exam. Take advantage of those things that we just talked about, moving when you can, moving your limbs, standing up if you're able. But again, be sure to check that. And your third next step is to be sure to check the different videos in this series. I tried to keep the visual branding consistent so you know what you're clicking on. But there's been some great feedback, which is why I wanted to do this video today, kind of help run with that momentum and get your feedback on what we should be doing next. So be sure to check those videos, and then we can talk about the next different videos in the series that are going to help you the most. And lastly, take advantage of the subscribe. We're talking about taking advantage of things when you can. I mean, take all the help you can get, right? So take advantage of the subscribe. I don't know of anyone else putting out regular videos on CSCS Exam Prep. So while we're doing this, I would love to hear from you. Again, hit that subscribe. Hit me up in the comments. I want to know what areas you would like me to address, what's going to help you the most. And then again, the more people we can help, the better we can help advance the field. Okay, so you have your marching orders. That's it. I'm David Barr. Until next time, raise the bar.